Hi, all. I'm Harv Nagra. I'm an operations consultant, a former in house agency operations director, and head of brand communications at Scoro. Our new podcast, The Handbook, the Agency Operations Podcast, endeavors to create more community for agency operations people. A place where we can hear from our peers and other experts on best practice, experiments, successes, and sometimes failures. When I got into agency ops, I was definitely lacking a bit of community. I was lucky in that I had a great mentor in house for guidance, and I had a fantastic friend and collaborator in our finance director. But beyond this, I didn't have anyone else I could speak to or learn from. I see that changing over the past couple of years. More individuals and organizations are having conversations and creating communities around agency operations. This is fantastic. We're finally getting to a time where there's more respect and appreciation being given to the role, but there's always room for more. I'd love for this podcast to be one more space and community where we can learn from each other and share knowledge. So if you're listening and thinking that you've got some lessons from your own experiments or your successes or failures that you'd like to share and you think others could benefit from hearing about, we want to hear about it. That could be the tools you're using, processes you've brought in, new approaches you're trying, anything at all. And I'd love for this to be a space where we can celebrate operations people and their journeys as well. Because as I always love saying, no one grows up wanting to be an operations person. Yet here we all are. So before we kick off with our interview series in the next episode, I wanted to introduce myself. Firstly, I'm based in London in the UK, but as you can probably tell from my accent, I didn't grow up here. I'm originally from another rainy city on the other side of the world, Vancouver, Canada, but I've been in the UK since summer 2012. I've always really been into design and tech and a bit of a control freak. Most of my career has been in the marketing space. I've worked at a couple of market research agencies. I've worked in marketing and producer roles. At one point, I was heading up the digital team at an agency with headquarters in London. There's kind of two themes that encapsulate how I saw the roles I was in or how I saw myself. First, I always felt those roles were never quite the perfect fit. I was really good at them, and there would be elements of my roles that I loved, but there would be other areas that I was less passionate about. And number two, I saw myself as a jack of all trades. Actually, I still do. But earlier in my career, I saw this as a liability. I could do a bit of everything, but I didn't feel like I was great at any of it. But once I moved into operations, I realized that this was my strength. Ops people need to know how to do a bit of everything and to be able to jump in and get their hands dirty supporting colleagues. I personally love how something I saw as a weakness has turned out to be a major strength. But hold on, how did I actually get into ops? Well, that's where my need for control and efficiency got me on the journey. When things are a bit broken and no one's taking responsibility to sort it out, I find myself stepping in to fix it. And I started doing that quite a lot at the agency where I was working. Things like the onboarding experience for new starters. I hated seeing new starters being sat down at an iMac where there were hundreds of files on the desktop. So I started volunteering to get their tech set up prior to their start date. There was nowhere for our multiple locations to showcase their wins and their work, let alone best practice. So I set up an intranet at the time. The review process was a bit of a box ticking exercise, which didn't really provide anyone with useful information. So I sat down with some colleagues to reinvent that process. And then the big one, we were moving away from Harvest, which we were using in a really haphazard way, and it was no longer suiting our needs. We were moving to a new PSA platform, and this was our big opportunity to bring a huge amount of maturity to our ways of working. So, alongside our new finance director, she and I got to work on planning that massive change program, which included, of course, internal comms, configuration, testing workflows, and the first time in our agency, documented procedures. It was a huge success. So that was my start. And as I was working through those initiatives, that's what made me realize that, hey, I'm really good at this. I'm getting kudos from my bosses for the work I'm doing. My peers are looking at me like an expert. And when I'm working on this stuff, that feeling of imposter syndrome tends to go away. Eventually, that turned into a full time role. Fast forward, and beyond taking on some ops consulting work, I've recently decided to join the team here at Scoro. It was a product I brought in at my previous agency and fell in love with. It transformed the way we worked, and I think it stands out in a space filled with platforms that either do similar things and look like they were designed in the 90s or only do a few elements of the functionality. This was my chance to create more of those conversations around agency ops that I was missing years ago when I got on this journey. So that's my story. Now, back to the podcast. Again, if you have a topic you'd like to talk about yourself, someone you think we should speak to, or something you think we should talk about in one of the upcoming episodes, please connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a DM. My name is Harv Nagra, and I'd love to chat. That's it for now, and I hope you'll join us for the first interview in our series in the next episode. This podcast is brought to you by Scoro, a platform designed for agencies and consultancies, which allows you to manage your projects, finances, and resources, all from one system. This is a platform I brought in at a previous workplace, which completely transformed the way we worked, and which I've recommended to clients of my own. You can sign up for a free trial on Scoro.com. That's SCORO.com. Or reach out to me, Harv Nagra, on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about some of my experiences.